Hey everybody, this is Dan from Pain Free You. Today I have the pleasure of introducing James from the UK. And James has been willing to share his story in the hope that it will help inspire somebody. So James, real pleasure to meet you. And why don't you take us on a little bit of a journey and tell us what you've been through, what you learned along the way, and we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, cool. And thank you for having me on and everything you do for TMS sufferers such as myself. So yeah, I had a kind of a crazy journey with TMS. Certainly not the craziest. There's a lot of stories on your channel.
There's no
But
contest. They're all
yeah,
valuable.
yeah. But I had a sort of very strange sort of like 9-10 month period that ended about a year ago now. Of like sort of various chronic pains
Mhm.
that started and it was mostly like sort of hand pain and like what a lot of people call like repetitive strain injury or like RSI type pain. So a lot of like chronic hand and wrist pain that sort of very obviously seemed to come out of like the physical activities that I was doing at that time. So this was in sort of like September 2023, and I was doing like a few hobbies where I like, use the hands a lot. Mostly it was that I was involved in this sort of gaming thing, like video games. I was involved in like a sort of competitive scene there, and I was like putting in quite a lot of hours, a lot more than I would normally do.
Yep.
As well as, like I play piano and do some like rock climbing as well. So
Lots of use of
all
the
in the
hand.
hands.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, like very sort of like credible story that like my initial sort of minor pains would have come from that, especially seeing as the gaming in particular had like suddenly stepped up a lot. Um, so I was doing that for like a few weeks, and then like started getting like this sort of like weird like numbness in the right hand while I was playing. Didn't think much of it at first, figured it would just sort of like sort itself out, which of course it didn't. Kept happening specifically just when I'm doing the gaming, so very obviously connected to that. Very obviously all to do with the physical activity. And then eventually like also started getting like achy wrists, like pain in the wrists and the lower parts of the hands, just kind of like, this little part of the hand. Just sort of felt like, almost like kind of minor sprain in the wrist type thing, like as if I had like taken a fall or something, which I hadn't, of course.
Okay.
And like, so like before long, I was like, okay, this is actually like getting worse, not better. I have to like step back from this, which of course I did. And at some point got to like casually just sort of like Googling symptoms, like, like the numbness is kind of a curious one, right? It's like, what's going on there? Is there like maybe like the nerves getting pinched? Maybe there's some swelling. And it's, I don't know, like, what are we dealing with here? And like,
Sure.
nothing could really have prepared me for like what I would find when Googling these sort of like seemingly quite like not really that like major symptoms, because like you quickly like the term you realize is the one is like RSI, like repetitive strain injury.
Sure.
And when you go down that rabbit hole, it was unbelievable what I found. It's just like real like horror stories of just like basically people get this and then they just don't get better. Seem to be like the really consistent story.
Uh-huh.
So like I was searching all over the place in all sorts of like online communities looking for people who had like found something that works for them, and like there are really hardly any stories of that kind at all. Just lots and lots and lots of the same story, which is like I've had this for X years or X number of decades. Tried all these sorts of conventional and unconventional treatments, and like have had like very underwhelming results in like usually over the course of a very long period of time.
Sure.
Unbelievably bad fallout that seemed to be happening by like pretty much every person I could find speaking about this.
Yep.
Which is, it was like a real shock. And so like, of course I freaked out, didn't I? As you would, like a lot of these people are like sort of like pushed out of work or like losing like hobbies or various like aspects of their lives that are super important.
Mm-hmm.
Work obviously being a huge deal. And like consistent with all of this, my symptoms weren't getting better, even though I'd sort of given up the gaming and the piano and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So eventually, with things not getting better and occasionally getting worse, I sort of stepped away from work you got to bear in mind, like some of this, like what I now realize was like misinformation out there, very widespread, and some of it was like along the lines of it's this like like super long term thing that is often irreversible.
Yeah.
You might be able to reverse it if your case isn't too far along, but if you don't rest your hands very carefully and you like make it worse, then you will push it into being a case that is irreversible.
Right.
So it's got this like really high stakes now. It's like if I like make a few slip ups, if I like worsen this, and like I keep doing things that do seem to like make it worse, and then like so that seems to be happening, and then like no matter how much I give up, that seems to keep happening. I always seem to have done just a little bit too much.
Yeah.
And just made it worse, and then like you've got this sort of like I bought that, unfortunately, that like if I like slipped up enough, it would be pushed into like being a case that is like irreversible and like really like quite disabling. So it's like super high stakes and like a lot of fear at that point.
Yep.
So crazy. So I'd stepped away from work, and then like sort of I remember at one time, this is kind of like getting into like November 2023. I went to like a family wedding, and just sort of like came back from that feeling like a lot worse. And then like that was when it was like again freaked out, and then like that was when like I like moved back in with mum and dad, because like at that point I'd pretty much given up everything that I could, like stopped doing everything that I could realistically, while still like living on my own and looking after myself, and apparently like still wasn't enough. And I was still believing this was like super dangerous for it to get any worse. So yeah, that was so about in like December, it was like basically I had to move back in with mum and dad and like give up just like that like basic independence, so that like I could have a lot of the like basic day-to-day things done for me that I didn't feel safe doing anymore. Crazy to think about it. So yeah, mum and dad really like
They stepped
had
up.
to, they really did. They did a lot for me in this time, and like I really can't like overstate like how bad like my mental state was at that time, and like throughout this whole sort of like throughout the whole thing really. That really can't be overstated. So.
Right.
Obviously went to like various doctors, and like more and more like variety of doctors over time. So like neurologists and I can't remember some of the other types, like rheumatologists and stuff like that. Just just looking for answers everywhere. And like got a few recommendations from those, mostly just stuff like physio, and like tried that, and of course had no luck. And I should mention, like, very early on in this whole thing, like when I was doing that initial sort of online research, while I was seeing like the like vast, overwhelming majority of stories were all just like this same story of like getting nowhere with years of struggle and like having like really like terrible, like compromised quality of life and having struggled for like many years or decades. Once in a blue moon, somebody would post about like a terrific recovery with the Sano stuff. Like, I'd be like Mind Body Prescription, this John Sarno thing. Obviously like read the blurb, or like, went and like checked it out a little bit, and just like dismissed it straight away, because it's just like, my stuff seems so just completely tied to what I'm doing physically, that every time I do something a bit too much, it gets worse. It all came out of the gaming and the stuff that I was doing. And like the symptoms appeared or flared up every time I did it. It was just so obviously physical. And then like in contrast, like repressed emotions causing pain, or like, I guess it's supposed to be repressed emotions, but like I was like, I'm not like in any obvious sort of like psychological or emotional turmoil right now, or I wasn't when it started. So like there was nothing like that going on. No obvious sort of psychological factors that it correlated with. It all seemed to really go with the physical. So like I just didn't make any sense to me at all. It didn't seem to fit my case. So like maybe it is a thing. I'm sure it is. I have heard of like psychosomatic stuff, but it's just like that's definitely not what it is for me. So like I remembered the concept. I saw like a video from like a gamer telling his story of how he recovered with that, but like it just didn't like seem to fit my case at all. So I moved on from it, and that was stupid.
Hey, so many people reject it at first. That's a normal conclusion.
Yeah, for
Just
me,
described sounds completely logical. Oh, okay, that doesn't seem to fit me. Let me set that aside.
hmm,
That's a logical conclusion. Unfortunately, it's not a correct conclusion, because you only had part of the picture from the. But
yeah, no. So just like yeah, like in retrospect, it's like I look at it as stupid now, but yeah, at the time that was what made sense to me, and a lot of other people, I'm sure,
yeah,
would
for
have been
sure.
the same. It's quite hard to understand. But so what was the next sort of thing? Okay, yeah. So like in the months that I was sort of with mum and dad, which is probably like sort of about 6 month period, the symptoms were kind of like became more varied and like kind of morphed a bit. So like the pain had sort of moved up the arms a bit. That would often so instead of achy wrist, it was more like sort of like hot burning pains, like spreading out the arms towards the elbows,
Right.
which is quite common in the sort of like with like RSI people that the pain just sort of starts spreading up the arm. That was like not really a surprise to be honest. But then like other weird stuff. So like I would get like sort of like tremors or like spasms, like my so like often like my finger would be sort of like doing this like involuntarily, and stuff like that. And often just to look at them, the hands, they would look sort of like not like discolored. So it'd be like either they'd be like a bit red and swollen, or like more often they'd be sort of like looking like a bit sort of like washed out, like grayish, like they're not getting proper blood flow or something. Really strange, but like that would happen like a lot as well. So you're getting these like tremors and like color changes, and like obviously the pain and numbness
Right.
was sticking around as well. And then like I started getting all these other sorts of like pains as well. So I would always sort of have some like I had lots of like coming and going sort of like lower body pains. So it's like every few days I've got like a new sort of like what feels like a minor injury. Like it'd be like my ankle feels like I've like sprained it, like a minor sprain. It's like, oh yeah, that hurts. Like not just sort of like a normal head, but like kind of like it's been sprained. And then like, maybe that would go away. But then next I would have like this terrible pain in like the back of my knee or something. And then it would be like both hips or something. But like it was just this sort of yeah, coming and going lower body pains. And then the one that was probably actually more problematic than that and like more consistent was like I would get this like terrible neck pain a lot, like kind of like just like a bad crick in the neck, like if you've had like a really bad night's sleep or something, but just like this like maddening neck pain that would like quite often flare up if I were just like sitting on the couch in front of the TV, which is one of the only things I felt safe doing, like physically at that point, given that like I'm not using my hands for anything if I can at all help it at this point. That was super weird. And then basically the last one that appeared, a bit like the weirdest one. So like at this point, I was like, one of the only things I could do with myself, especially now that I'm like finding I can't even really like sit on the couch comfortably for like any real period of time often. So one of the only things I was sort of doing myself at this point is like just like going out for like walks, just like short or medium length walks, like a few times a day,
Mhm.
just half the time. And not like crazy like distances or anything, just sort of like you're like probably less than 10,000 steps a day. Although like maybe getting towards that, but that's like a healthy recommendation, right? So like, and I was doing less than that. So like not crazy mileage or anything. And yet, despite that, I started getting this like terrible pain on like the bottoms of my feet, like the sort of like on the underside of the foot, just sort of like the bit that you kind of stride off when you're striding off of one foot onto the other, the bit that you sort of really put your weight on, kind of like toward the front of the foot. And that just made like really like difficult to walk at all because it was like really painful to stand on that bit. And then like I would have to just like not do that. At which point, all I could really do was just kind of like hobble around on my like heels, or in sort of like a very like flat-footed, like awkward way. So crazy, just like really painful on both feet, the same part, and just on the underside of both feet.
Yep.
So I'm just like, Jesus Christ, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Yeah. And I started to notice that weird sort of like grayish discoloration in the feet as well at this point. So it's like, if I don't know what this is, but like it's spread down to the feet now as well. It's just like, Jesus, like, what's going on? Um, and like around this time, like my mum was actually like reading about like psychosomatic illness. She had read some stuff like this in the past and had kind of like
Mhm.
started to think it might be something like that. And she was putting some like stories in front of me from this book she had of like people with like conversion disorder who like get really like dramatic symptoms from like what turn out to be psychological causes, like terribly like debilitating symptoms like blindness or like paralysis or severe muscle weakness and stuff like that from and all sorts of other stuff, to be honest. And again, those symptoms were like seemed quite extreme and not at all like the ones I was having. Like yeah, like blindness and paralysis, that didn't like quite seem to fit either. But like I was warming up to the idea, I suppose. Like it was laying some important groundwork, you know.
Sure.
Um, and yeah, so at this time, like I wasn't like using the computer at all. I didn't feel like that was safe. Computer use is like, you know, a classic, you know, like a lot of people get RSI from like being on the computer all the time. That's basically like probably most people who develop it like get it through their work being on the computer all the time. So I wasn't doing that. That was well off limits. Um, but my dad helped me get this like voice control software for the computer so that I could like get back online or whatever. It's like it's quite often used by people with like RSI problems.
Hmm.
Like yeah, like voice control, you just do everything via voice. I was able to get back online a bit, and then like as an aside, of course, like my jaw started hurting whenever I used it for more than a few minutes.
Oh,
I'd have to like literally everything I try and do, right, just gets like taken away. Crazy. Um, so weird. But then like at some point when I was back online, I think I just got back to like, you know, checking out a few resources again. And like the Sano stuff came up again. You know, my mum had been showing me these stories about psychosomatics. It was kind of a bit more front of mind. And it was just finally time to like revisit it a bit. And luckily, I just stumbled onto this like YouTube video of some guy telling his story of like RSI and recovering through John Sarno's method. And that was just like the one that was like, that's just like me. And it's just like all the reasons why my case must be physical and not psychosomatic.
hmm
It was like the same for him too. And then it just turned out to be, it's just like a really good imitation of a physical problem that goes perfectly hand in hand with physical causes.
Sure.
But it just somehow like turned out that for him it was psychosomatic, and that was the one that got through to me initially. I was just like, oh my god, that might actually. So like, okay, maybe it can actually make sense for me, and that was when I just sort of started like diving into like the TMS resources, like got like the mind body connection like straight away and gave that a read, and then that was also when I sort of like I was like checking out other YouTube stories, and of course that's kind of when I found your channel, and got a lot of use out of the like in particular the success stories playlist. So I read the book like straight away and like was completely convinced, and then like really sort of internalized what was in there and what you sort of talk about in a lot of your videos, and just like got this like sort of unwavering confidence that this is definitely it. And like, you know, if I maintain like a sort of like absolute belief that like this is definitely it and it's not a dangerous physical injury, then we can make progress. But if I do sort of like go back to like being worried about the physical, then like come back. Anyway, so like I started like daring to do a bit more, and I immediately knew I was onto something because the sort of expected backlash of it like getting much worse in response to doing some physical stuff just didn't come. So I was just like, okay, well that's like contrary to everything I've been like experiencing so far, which is that if I ever like dare to do anything, it like gets worse. And it didn't get worse, and I was like, okay, this is definitely it. And then, so in my case, I decided to just sort of slowly ease back into everything because I know some people do just go like hammer and tongs, could just go 0 to 100 straight away. And just like go back to all like, all their like physical activities straight away. But I was just like, like I've been like not using my hands at all for like a long time now.
Yeah.
And if I do like start just like go like really hammer and dongs on it, I might start getting some actual normal sort of aches and pains from doing like, and then like that just kind of, then it's like, well, what's TMS? And yeah, that would be like very disconcerting. And then it becomes quite difficult to disentangle what is TMS versus what is actual like real like aches and pains from like this sudden increase in activity. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, what, I'm going to keep it nice and simple for myself. I'm just going to go nice and slow. And then any symptoms I get, because I haven't done anything controversial, any symptoms I get, they just like must be TMS because I haven't done anything physically dangerous. And just I could just like have that absolute confidence that like whatever I do get is just TMS and can be ignored. And I just went with that like bit by bit. It was working well for me, and I was like unbelievably relieved at this point because I've like come back from like I've come back from like but essentially as far as I could tell like life over to like actually these people who make like a brilliant recovery in 2 months have actually like I am gonna potentially have that. So
awesome.
I just like really overjoyed about that. And then I was just like playing my games again a bit, again like just daring to do all the things that like I would be scared to do, and just like not allowing fear to keep me from any of this. And then like I just like suddenly started like really getting like the numbness again. Like it just sort of like really just like having not been there for ages, just like really came back in the middle of a gaming session, just like it did originally. Mm-hmm. And that was like a real like moment where like I could have freaked out. And for a split second, I was like, I'll do this. But like I had like bought into like the Sarno school of thought so much and like really understood that like you just have to like have like absolute confidence in the diagnosis. I just didn't let it start. I just doubled down and just like kept playing and just did more. I just kept going with it, and like that just sort of disappeared in a day or two. A few other sort of like challenges along the sort of recovery journey. I would say like I was like 95% better in like 2 months. By the way, it was like one of those like quite quick recoveries. After that 2 months, I was like basically entirely better. We'd have like occasional minor symptoms like pop up from time to time, but then those just sort of became fewer and further in between. And now a year later, like I don't get that at all. So it's just like actually 0%, like literally nothing. So like,
I love it.
Thank God for that. But
how long was the journey from when it started until when you started, really committing to the Sarno world? How long did you deal with that?
It was like sort of like August, September till May. So sort of like several months, like a sort of like, like what's that, like 8-9 months maybe, and then like 2 months of like 2 months from there to like essentially fully recovered. And then like I did have like very minor occasional symptoms for several months after, but just sort of like really like start like few and far between, and just until just like nothing. Like right now I can't remember the last time I had anything of note. So that was cool. Yeah, it was quite weird when I was in that 2 months though, because one thing I had was this like wrist pain that was sort of like if I sort of bent my wrist back at all, I did anything like that, that would be quite painful, and that wasn't exactly like what I had before, so that was kind of like new. Mm-hmm. And I was on the fence for a while with that one because it stuck around, and I was like, this could be TMS or it could be just like an actual pain, but like it just stuck around, and I was like, well, I haven't been doing anything physically like dangerous. I haven't been doing too much too soon. I haven't jumped back from like into like super intense activity straight away or anything. It's not going away. There's no reason why I should have a physical injury that's lasting like this. It must just be more TMS.
Right.
And then that was when so I just just started like doing push-ups and stuff, and it's like this like actually really quite hurts to do this, but like I don't care. I'm just gonna like double down on it, and then like that went away. Like when I started doing that, basically. Okay. So just like more like clear lessons for me that like that's definitely the approach. Like doing less never made anything any better for me throughout the whole time. I was always like trying to find ways to do less and getting scared off of more and more things, and like it never got better. And then just like every time
Avoidance never is the answer, because when you avoid something, you're saying that's dangerous. And your brain is saying, you're right. I'll protect you from that by giving you pain so you don't do that dangerous thing.
That's it, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. And like you always say on the channel, yeah, like some of your words are like really stuck about how like, what is it fueled by? It's like fear and misinformation and like attention. Those are the sort of things that are like really remembered. So like just giving it attention or being afraid and just giving it like your attention is just like what not to do. So like I've really learned to not do that. Yeah. So I was like, that was the other thing I was doing as well as just going back to activities is like I would like, watch a success story or a video of some kind, like maybe one of your like daily sort of videos or like really like the success stories really helped drive it home, like how real it is.
Mhm.
Just like to keep it all front of mind, keep myself like convinced, keep up the confidence that like this is definitely it, this is definitely real. It's just like made sure to like watch like a success video every day, something like that, to just like and just did that. Yeah, there's some of those are like really really awesome videos because a lot of them had like stuff in common with my stories, and also like what I started to realize is like I actually have had like a kind of a long-term chronic pain thing like years back, which I now realize was actually like TMS as well. Like this was like in the past, but from sort of like age 17 to like age 25,
Right.
I was like really into like I was really into like this like parkour and free running like type sport where you're like doing a lot of like running and jumping, and it's like a tremendous workout for the legs.
Yeah.
And like I started getting like shin splints and like bad shin pain, and like I was like really into this thing, but I had to give it up and stuff. And then like that shin pain just like followed me around for like 8 years, long after I stopped doing the sport. And like pushed me out of like a lot of like hobbies that I wanted to be doing, or like couldn't really like consistently get into like running or any other kind of sport that I wanted to, because it would always just sort of like flare up and
Yeah.
and just sort of escalate until it got to the point where I was like, okay, I need to back off. And then eventually that just kind of disappeared without a trace when I was like 25. That was like 8 long years of like not being able to do quite a lot of stuff.
Right.
And that was like really similar to a story. I can't remember the woman's name now, but that was really cool. So like got a lot out of those success stories.
That's great. So that's a pretty neat journey. Well, you're blessed because it seems like your entire from the time the hand wrist thing started until the time you really got through was less than a year, it seems.
Yeah, exactly. Like
So
really like
some people deal with
quite
years, kind of like your shin thing. So you're going to go back to parkour now?
well, that was the one where it's like that. So like I got pushed out of that when I was sort of like really into it when I was like 17, and then I had that problem until I was 25, and then I did get back into it for a while, but then like now I've just sort of like moved on for like other reasons. So that's not a hobby of mine at the moment, but
Understood.
and then like years later is like the recent thing with the RSI.
So you're back to full gaming. Have you returned to work?
But more than ever, like all of that, like yeah, like get the gaming, piano, rock climbing, full time work, like literally, or like more than ever. It's
Love it.
just like, and yeah, and like I wouldn't be if I were to start getting like those symptoms again, I would know not to.
Right.
And if I do ever get any like shin splints or any other like unexplained pain that like really like, persists in a way that doesn't make sense, it's just like I know what it is now. I don't need to be.
One of the things I'll remind people who are watching is that my core belief is the more we use the body a certain way, the stronger it gets. So gaming, it doesn't break down the hands. Computers, it's ridiculous. In the old days, in the 70s, they used to have typewriters that had like levers and you had to like slam on the keys to throw this lever up against the ribbon.
Yeah.
They would type like this. I would hear my mom typing click, clack, 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 and she's slamming on it. And now all of a sudden we get computers and people are doing this. and this is somehow damaging wrists
And
all
it's
over the
like,
world.
yeah,
Doesn't make any sense at
it
all.
just doesn't. Yeah. So once I discovered the TMS stuff and I started really like re-examining all of that, I was just like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, and like when I was, every time I would get one of these like bizarre, like new lower body pains, I'd be like, oh, it must be that like incredibly like innocuous thing I did the other day. It was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like that was just absolutely nothing. I didn't used to have to like worry about every little thing I do with my body. But like, it's just like, God, that doesn't
And
make
you
any
don't.
sense.
The body is so much more
Not at all.
resilient than that. The body is
Unbelievably so.
capable.
Yeah,
And I'm sure back in your parkour days, you've seen some people take some pretty wicked spills.
exactly.
And
And
they
just, yeah,
recover. And they recover. They have an injury, it heals, and they recover. So the body is so strong and resilient. To think that gaming or computers or piano is damaging us. I think
it just doesn't make any
Sarno even
sense.
pointed out that RSI in the 90s, in a 5-year stretch, increased by 500%. So the incidence of RSI went from whatever, one in so many people to 5 times that in 5 years because
And
it,
like, it's,
yeah, became
yeah,
popular, in vogue.
that's it. It's like that misinformation is out there now, and it's really widespread. That's like a real shame because like the information out there is like if you go googling RSI because you're starting to have symptoms, like it's unbelievable what you find. Just pure misinformation, super widespread.
Yep.
Several people that I know, just like personally, like friends, have like parroted back to me as well, like the whole sort of like, oh yeah, like I've heard once you get that, it's just kind of like you're stuck with it, or like I know somebody who got it and like has had it ever since. It's just like this like really popular myth, this really like
Yeah.
this like popular misconception now that's like it's a shame because like yeah, it's not what people need to be hearing. There's some like really dangerous misinformation out there.
Yeah. It paralyzes
And
people with fear.
almost nobody like sharing like the Sano stuff. Like one in every like 50 posts would be like somebody saying like, oh hey, I did this like John Sano method and like made a complete like perfect recovery in like relatively short time.
Right. So
I
that's
just
brilliant that you're willing to do it because you're going to help shift the tide for people in your world. So like gamers are going to start realizing, oh, there's a way out. You'll be that 1 in 100 posts that will have somebody go, oh, cool. You mean I can get better? I don't have to believe all of the misinformation and the fear. So that's brilliant. I'm so thrilled you're doing this.
yeah, that's basically it. Like I wanted to make one of these and get my story on the pile, and then I'll probably share this link in some of the places where I was reading all the stuff
Absolutely.
that sent me down the wrong path and stuff. And like I actually know somebody like a friend's one of my friend's girlfriends was having like terrible back pain. And
Mhm.
like I just like talked their ear off about like the whole John Sino thing, and they eventually like got it, and like they're fine now because
It happens over and over and over again. My landlord just had dinner with a friend, and that friend was talking about somebody else who was having some significant pain issues. And they're feeling so much better now because they followed this guy who put videos on the internet. And
so good.
my landlord's friend was going, that sounds a lot like your tenant, Bob. And they were like, what's his name? Oh, Dan. "Oh, yeah, that's him. Small world. So like a friend of my landlord's like got better with my stuff. And it's incredible. The influence this interview is going to have will be far reaching. And if you can help a few people, which you will, um, it's worth the time and effort. And you want to give people the accurate information so they don't have to go through a year of absolute terror that their life is over.
That's a perfect summary of what that was. Yeah, and like it's amazing actually how common now that I can see it, how often I see it. So like for instance, like, I've got like another friend who like just started getting like unexplained tinnitus one day, and like just like really bad tinnitus that was like really messing them up, and
Mhm.
they're just, oh, what am I going to do? Because it's just constant. I can't listen to this for the rest of my life. And then like they actually like found it like a doctor who kind of got through to them and like made them understand that like yeah, a lot of people who get tinnitus actually get it for psychological reasons, and um, when they treat it psychologically, they get better. And so he was actually
Yeah.
well on the way to recovery when he first told me about this. But like, yeah, it's just there. And like my friend there, my mum's been having like terrible like sciatica with no explanation, and she's like been in for surgery with no luck with that. So like, you know, I'm like pretty convinced that's another TMS case. I'm trying to
Yeah.
get through to her.
Have her pick up my book. I mean, the book explains all of it, you know. Um,
For sure, yeah,
it's
yeah.
available at, amazon.co.uk.
Yeah, I think she like skimmed the like mind body prescription, and I was like, okay, like we need to get her reading these books cover to cover.
Yeah, or
The Denver,
watch the YouTube stuff for sure. I had
yeah,
13,
I did show her loads of your videos as well, like the
I
success
had
stories.
I had 13 years of back pain and sciatica.
13 years, yeah, I always remember that. I always remind her of that when
Always TMS.
yeah, it's
You're going to be able to spot it everywhere.
it really is everywhere, absolutely everywhere.
Unfortunately, most people do what you did in the beginning, which is that's not me. I have a real problem. And as you start to share this interview, don't be surprised if some people are like, James, I got a real problem. What do you mean this stuff? You must not have had RSI. They're going to reject the success because they're so indoctrinated into this is a lifetime thing. You're permanently broken.
Yeah, yeah, no, people don't like it. Yeah, you get the whole like it's like, are you saying it's all in my head? That's like
But it's
people don't like
not.
that.
It's not in your head. The pain is real.
No, yeah.
You know the pain is real. You weren't faking.
That's what I always try and like emphasize to people, because like yeah, I've told the story, or like summarized it for a lot of the people who knew I was having problems and whatnot, and like I try and emphasize that it was like you could see the symptoms, you could see that my hands were like
Discolored.
tremoring or like discolored or swollen and like whatnot, as well as obviously like what I could feel. Like the symptoms are very physical, you could see them with your own eyes, but with a root cause that is ultimately like a psychological root cause. And
Yeah,
it's tricky because like yeah, a lot of people like hear it and then ultimately sort of leave with the impression that like you know like
that's not me.
that I imagined it, or sort of like you know stuff like that as well. Well, like not that I imagined it, but yeah, that it wasn't real, and that I was kind of like
Yeah.
I don't know what people think, but I do worry sometimes that people just like don't get it and think that like you know I just imagined it or it was all in my head type thing.
Yeah.
So I try and emphasize that like you could actually see the symptoms. It was definitely like physical, but with a psychological root cause, hence psychosomatic. But yeah,
I was going to say the way I position it is that it's not necessarily always an emotional cause. Perceived danger is the cause. If the brain perceives that gaming is dangerous, it will create symptoms to protect you and warn you of this perceived danger. And the more you do it, the more it reacts to that physical activity, which makes you go, of course it's physical. I'm gaming, it hurts. I'm gaming, it goes numb. It must be physical. But the brain is basically going, yeah, but we think the gaming is the problem. So the brain is doing its job by warning you with symptoms anytime you do these dangerous activities. So
if
safe
you've
is
gone
a
in
way
for
out.
the
Go ahead.
yeah, and if you've like you know had this misinformation telling you that like you've got this dangerous physical injury that is like on the verge of being pushed into being like
Right.
made worse and made into an unrecoverable case, like an irreversible case, it's a lot of danger being perceived there as oh my god, that's
Right.
yeah, literally. So like yeah,
It's how the system works. And now that you've got this information, you're not going to fall prey to it. You might have a little bit of a, hey, what's this? Is this the same stuff? But this insight that you've got now is going to remain with you forever. You're going to know how to decipher what's going on. And the best response to any new symptom is, all right, well, I'm not going to give it any concern or attention and see what happens. Now, of course, disclaimer, if anybody's having something that feels life-threatening, go to the hospital, right? Heart can't breathe, stroke-like symptoms, infections, like, yeah, be reasonable. go to the doctors when something seems life-threatening. But pain in your hands, not necessarily life-threatening, but very disturbing and upsetting. And so I just had to put that disclaimer out because I don't want people to think that everything is this and just ignore everything and you'll be fine. That's not what I'm saying. Let's rule out the
Yeah.
life-threatening stuff, but then we can start to rule this stuff in. And for anybody who's wondering how to rule this stuff in, there's an assessment, chapter 6 of the book, and there's also is this TMS.com, which is a pain test which you can utilize to do the assessment to say, how are my symptoms behaving? And so you rule out the life threatening, you rule in TMS, and if it's TMS, then proceed like James just explained by teaching your brain that you're really not sick or broken. And within 2 months, you're able to recover all your activity. So that was brilliant. I love it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So unless you've got anything else, we'll wrap this one up. Anything else?
I think that's everything.
All right. Beautiful. Well, listen, I really appreciate you sharing this story. We will definitely put it on the success story playlist with RSI as the main symptom, and that will help a lot of people who are searching for RSI success story, and they'll be able to find it. So you're going to do a lot of good for the people in that particular world. But there's other people who don't have RSI. They may have something else going on, but the lessons that you've shared apply equally to anybody with any symptom. So maybe even just having your mom listen in and see your conversation with me, maybe that'll help her open up to this a little bit more. We'll see. So, all right, James, thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
All right, take care.